It was used for rope, parachutes, a replacement for steel, and even the word canvas comes from the word cannabis. It easily grows everywhere and is actually used to reclaim land once abandoned. It grows in poor soil conditions and can grow more crops and yield more plant matter than most other crops out there. In 1619, the King of England ordered farmers in the American colonies that they, quote, must grow cannabis, and even allowed people to pay their taxes in cannabis. George Washington grew cannabis, and even the Declaration of Independence was written on it. By 1850, there were over 8,000 plantations of 2,000 acres or more that grew cannabis. Cannabis was so prevalent that it was actually pictured on the 1914 $10 Federal Reserve note that showed the wealth of our nation in manufacturing and agriculture, specifically the cannabis harvest featured on the left. With the abolition of slavery in 1865, there was not really an economical way of processing cannabis until 1935, when the decorticator made cannabis extremely economical, and it was named the next billion-dollar crop by Popular Mechanics, since it can be used in 25,000 products, from dynamite to cellophane. In fact, if you look at all the uses of cannabis, it's not so much a crop as it is an industry. With the new uses and devalued dollar of today, cannabis would not be a billion-dollar crop. I believe it would be a trillion-dollar industry. The most basic reason why cannabis is illegal is simple economics. What would the effect of cannabis being legalized to the paper, corn, cotton, alcohol, tobacco, prescription drug, prison, and even banking industries? How many of the 45 million Americans hooked on powerful antidepressants that have been known to cause homicidal and suicidal psychotic breaks would be better off smoking cannabis? How many less prisoners, prisons, police, court, drug raids, seizures would there be if cannabis was made legal? How much money would the medical and industrial complex lose if people knew that cannabis cured cancer, like in this recent Harvard study? How much money and power would flow out of the money centers if nature was made legal? The person perhaps most responsible for making cannabis illegal is William Randolph Hearst. You know, that billionaire megalomaniac propagandist warmonger that is depicted in Citizen Kane, pining over a childhood toy on his deathbed after wasting his entire life pursuing power over others.
Delightful in Cuba, stop.
Could send you prose poems about scenery, but don't feel right spending your money. Stop. There is no war in Cuba. Signed, Wheeler. Any answer?
Yes, dear Wheeler, you provide the prose poems. I'll provide the war.
That's fine, Mr. Kane.
When he was not starting the Spanish-American War for American imperialism with his yellow journalism, he was the chief propagandist against cannabis, because now with the decorticator in 1935, cannabis became a huge threat to the millions he had invested in the timber industry. After all, cannabis can yield much more paper in less time and impact than logging. He set about to make a new drug called marijuana illegal, because if he called it cannabis, people would have thought he was crazy, since it was so prevalent in everyone's world. William Randolph Hearst printed racist stories about blacks and Hispanics raping white women. And soon after, Reefer Madness was released in 1936, showing people having psychotic and murderous breaks.
But at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide, and the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important bill now, before it is too late.
Cannabis is so versatile that Henry Ford actually made a car out of hemp fiber that was lighter than steel and 10 times as strong. Here's a video of a man using an axe on the hemp car to demonstrate how strong it is.
The magic ingredient is hemp. It's in the body panels, it's in the rear spoiler, and it's also being used in the manufacture of the seats.
Take a look at the exterior of the house. This is hempcrete. It's a mixture of hemp, lime, and water.
Henry Ford not only used hemp fiber to build the car, he even used hemp oil to fuel it. In fact, Rudolph Diesel, who invented the diesel engine, originally used hemp oil to power his car. Meanwhile, John D. Rockefeller was dumping gasoline into the Cuyahoga River because he had no use for gasoline, and it caused the river to burn. John D. Rockefeller immediately moved to have the gasoline engine become the standard of the auto industry, because it served his industry over the farmers that would have benefited from the industrial use of hemp oil. Prohibition of alcohol lasted from 1919 to 1933. The federal government used it as a way to push its federal power on the states and created this huge bureaucracy to fight alcohol. When alcohol was made legal again, the government shifted to narcotics, and the number one on that list was cannabis, which accounts for over 80% of the, quote, illicit drug use. Harry Anslinger was the head of the newly created division of the Treasury Department called the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He declared on this new drug called marijuana, saying, quote, "Reefer makes the darkies think they're as good as white men. Marijuana leads to pacifism and communist brainwashing. You smoke a joint and you're likely to kill your brother. Marijuana is the most violent causing drug in the history of mankind." So between racism and the false belief that it will make blacks pacified communist murderers, the marijuana tax passed in 1937 with little or no debate, and most congressmen didn't even know cannabis was included in this, since they called it marijuana. By making easily grown cannabis illegal, it also gave support to the centralized drug trade that the Anglo-American Empire runs, going all the way back to the British East Indian Company, the Opium Wars, and even today with Dick Grasso trying to get the FARC and Colombia to invest in the stock market, and HSBC laundering drug money even today. Things that cannot go on forever won't. After spending trillions of dollars over the next few decades on a failed drug war, we now have more prisoners in the prison industrial complex of America than Stalin ever had in his gulags. I believe that like the last Great Depression made alcohol legal, this next Greatest Depression will make nature legal once again with cannabis. If it was not a threat to power, then why on earth would they make it illegal? After all, there is not one death ever in thousands of years attributed to smoking cannabis.
A councilman from Dearborn, Michigan is outraged over a 911 call. He wants to know why no charges have been filed against a police officer who admits to confiscating marijuana from suspects and then baking it in brownies. And once he and his wife were full and high, they thought they'd overdosed and called 911.
I think I'm having an overdose, and so is my wife.
Overdose of what?
Marijuana. I don't know if it had something in it. Can you please send rescue?
Did you guys have fever or anything?
No, I think we're dying.
Okay, how much did you guys have?
I don't know. We made brownies, and I think we're dead. Time is going by really, 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 really slow.
Well, instead of being charged, Instead of being charged, the police department let the officer resign. His wife was not charged either. So far, police officials have not commented on the case.
Yet over 400,000 people die from tobacco every year just in the United States. People will say that people would abuse cannabis and that's why it should be made illegal. Have you looked at how people are abusing food, video games, porn, alcohol, prescription drugs, consumerism, and the entire planet? Why don't we just make everything else illegal? Or at least the things that actually kill people? No, people should be able to do whatever they want to do, including cannabis, so long as it doesn't harm anyone else. In fact, the government would have you believe that it's so dangerous that they list cannabis as a Class 1 drug, and is listed more dangerous than cocaine and meth. Have you seen what meth does to people? How is cannabis more dangerous than that?